Last week, a delegation from the BRI joined a coalition of, I think, over 100 representatives from a broad-based foundation of organizations, business groups, other construction industry associations, to attend Lobby Day up in Albany. Those here in the audience who came with me, Jason, Carmelo Emilio, I don't know if Mike Baldotti's here, Eric Abraham came up with us, and Ken Finger, our counsel, and Kevin Marbury, you came up with us. And it was really, as often as I've done it, it's an interesting exercise in, I would say, chaotic democracy. And believe me, Lobbying Day is not only regarding the Scaffold Law, but as our guest speaker can tell you, and my colleagues here, Lobbying Day is for every interest throughout the state. The Butchers Association, the Bakers Association, the Candlestick Makers, you get the picture. I mean, it's one big mulligan stew of lobbying. But this in particular affects us all in a number of different ways. And our first speaker is the executive director of this statewide alliance, the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York, Tom Stebbins, and he really has put together as an orchestra, as a maestro, an orchestra leader, a concerted effort to finally maybe make some headway in this. Now that a major stumbling block to the legislative process, Sheldon Silver, is no longer there. So I'm not going to say any more because it's a fascinating story, and I think only Tom Stebbins and my colleagues can do it justice. So I'm going to hand it over the mic to Tom Stebbins, our guest speaker tonight, who is the executive director of the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Tom?
Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, thanks to Albert and Jeff and all you guys for coming, and happy birthday. Happy 70th birthday. Congratulations. Before I get started, how many of the folks here are familiar with the Scaffold Law? Okay, so it seems about half. I'm going to say the most important thing about the Scaffold Law to know is that it has nothing to do with scaffolds. That is the number one thing you need to know. What it does is it imposes absolute liability on contractors and property owners, even if they had nothing to do with the plaintiff's accident. So, I'll give you a perfect example. Somebody on a job site cut a hole around themselves in the floor. This is not a good idea. They fell through the floor. Now, in any other state, you would go to court and you would say that person is an idiot and cut a hole around themselves in the floor. And this cannot be 100% my responsibility. And a jury would deliberate and decide and apportion liability. In New York, no. In New York, you, as the contractor and property owner, are liable for that person's injury, full stop. Were they drinking? Doesn't matter. Were they showing off their favorite dance moves while they were cutting a hole around themselves in the floor? Doesn't matter. It is your fault, it is your liability, most importantly. It is not your fault. And that is the problem, and that's what we're trying to fix. We are trying to change New York's law from this absolute liability standard, which only exists in New York. It does not exist in any other state, and indeed, as we have studied, it does not exist in any other country that we can find that apportions liability in this way. And so next time you pay your insurance bill, and I know we have some insurance folks here, and I know we have some attorneys here, next time you pay your insurance bill and you wonder, why on earth am I paying this much for insurance? You can thank Albany. I live there. And I appreciate Albert's kind words about our lobby day, but you lobby these people and you say, look, this law costs billions of dollars and according to research, seems to actually cause injuries. It turns out when people are not responsible for their own safety by law, they're less responsible with their safety. How about that? And so we find that this law costs billions of dollars out of your pocket as contractors, as remodelers, as home builders, your pocket as taxpayers, and all the while, it seems to increase the rate of injuries in New York. So, my organization, the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York, is trying to fix it. We are the statewide tort reform organization. I do work for doctors and hospitals. I do work for railroads. I do work for all sorts. Everybody gets sued, except for lawyers. They don't get sued as much. But everybody else gets sued. And I represent all those people. But for the contractors and remodelers and for the injustice of this particular law, I've taken special interest. So I'm just going to give a quick update on what my organization has done with the help of Albert and BRI and many others, and then talk briefly about what we plan to do. So we've gathered a coalition of groups. You'll notice some of the names here include Habitat for Humanity, the School Boards Association, the Farm Bureau. We obviously have lots of contractors. We have the Manufacturers Alliance, the Conference of Mayors. We have a broad coalition. On the other side, generally you're seeing the plaintiffs' lawyers and the building trades. Here's some shots from our lobby day. I tried to find a shot of Albert. We had over 100 folks. Our keynote speakers were Habitat for Humanity and the Association for Affordable Housing. In the past, we've had minority contractors as one of our themes, and we've also had, as I mentioned, the Conference of Mayors and the municipal groups, because municipalities, turns out, get sued a lot as well. I talked a little bit about these groups. I'm just going to keep on moving on. We've taken our message to the press. That was the day that Sheldon Silver went to trial. That's where I got all the microphones in my face. Sheldon Silver was a personal injury lawyer, but it turns out he wasn't practicing. He was just getting paid. He was getting paid $750,000 a year to do no work. Sounds like a pretty good gig. Well, it turns out he was doing a lot of work on behalf of the trial lawyers generally in Albany to stop everything that I'm trying to do on behalf of you, on behalf of many folks, to lower the impact of lawsuits and liability on New Yorkers. We are the lawsuit capital of the world. It's not close, and it's not helping us. We've had editorial boards from across the state. You can't really read any of that, but it's the Daily News, New York Post, Cranes, Rochester Democrat, Buffalo, Utica, pretty much every one except the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, because they generally do national stuff. We've got lots of media platforms. You can go to scaffoldlaw.org, you can sign up, you can find out more about what we're doing each and every day, and in about 1 minute you can write your local legislator, and you know what? You probably don't know who they are, and that's okay. You can still write them a letter. I didn't know who they were until I became a registered lobbyist. I had to take a shower first, and then I learned out who my assembly person was, and I started doing my job. But it's understandable. Most people don't know who their state legislator is, but you know what? You can use that to your advantage. They've never heard from you. They've never heard from most anybody. I mean, lobby day is a crazy mess, but in terms of letters from actual people, it doesn't happen very often. So you can use our platform. You can do it in 1 minute. We did a paid media campaign as well. That was a billboard that we put out with the support of our members. We had lobby day just recently. We've now had 33 counties pass resolutions where there's county resolutions in support of reform. It's so difficult to do at the state because the State Trial Lawyers Association, and if anybody's interested, I have a full report we did on this called Power of Attorney. The State Trial Lawyers Association puts lots of money in Albany politicians' pockets. That's how they make their money, and so they make a lot of money suing you guys. They make tons of money, they give some of that back to the politicians, and the politicians make sure it's really easy to sue you guys. That's how our government system works, I'm afraid. But we're working to fix it. We've discovered lots of sources of data. You'll notice these are your insurance costs, essentially. Whatever the high bar is, you can't read that. The high bar one is New York, if you're wondering. And this is a good example. This is data from the Port Authority, and it shows on a bridge spanning from New York to New Jersey, the insurance costs on the New York side are twice that of the New Jersey side. So you've got the same project, same workforce, same weather, same everything. Different laws. And so twice The average cost. And that's the average cost. That's the average. That's all the Port Authority bridges spanning between New York and New Jersey. We've done some original research. This is where we discovered that the presence of this law actually causes injuries. The researchers, to hold us, to figure out how much this law cost, wanted to figure out what the benefits were. And so they did an analysis of how many lives this supposedly saves, according to the trial lawyers. It's saving so many lives. We can't get rid of this essential safety protection. Never mind that every other state doesn't have it, but we need it, says the trial lawyers. We did a study, tried to figure out what the benefits were, and it turns out that the presence of the law increases injuries. We have looked at this data backwards, forwards, upside down, and sideways, and it still shows us the presence of this law increases injuries. We were very close in 2014, but there is your former Speaker of the Assembly, Sheldon Silver. And at that same time, the Governor Cuomo said, in relation to this particular law, the trial lawyers are the single most powerful political force in Albany. Because they give Albany politicians a lot of money. And because the Speaker was getting paid $750,000 by a personal injury law firm. Well, that's him going to jail. And as has the Speaker, or as has the Senate Majority Leader, also had a no-show job for a law firm, worth noting. Not what he went to jail for, though. Went to jail for a no-show job for his son. No-show jobs are legal, but no-show jobs for your children are not. I don't know why that makes sense, but that's the way Albany works, I guess. So some of the things we're trying to do, get new people. The solar installers contacted me recently. They said, we don't want to be qualified as roofers. We're paying so much in roofing insurance. And I said, well, it's actually, guys, it's this scaffold law. It doesn't matter if you call yourself shoemakers. If you're up on a roof, you're going to pay through the nose for insurance. And they said, well, we don't use scaffolds. And I said, remember, the number one rule of scaffold law doesn't have anything to do with scaffolds. It's the number one rule of scaffold law. Doesn't have anything to do with scaffolds. So, one of the things that I'd like to do, and I invite any of you belong to any civic groups, any Rotary, I don't care. You just want me to come talk to your Nana for a while? I'll do it. That's my job. Albany's a waste of time. And getting grassroots people like you to send letters and get educated about this law is why we've had the success that we've had in the past few years. Some of our existing materials. This is a video that we did with Reverend Jacques DeGraff. We had, at the time, almost 21 views. It's just a 2-minute video, or I think that's actually just 57 seconds describing the impact. We're going to continue to use paid media. We're going to continue to get counties to support our effort. And if any of you have contacts with the unions, the governor's office has told us we can fight the trial lawyers. We can fight the unions. We cannot fight the unions and the trial lawyers at the same time. The trial lawyers have the dollars, the unions have the bodies. And the only thing that beats money is votes, and the unions are providing that right now. In the work of the unions, I think their position about this is they want to get something from it. They want something from it. They're not going to support this unless they get something from it. But I think once they realize how much this is costing them, and once they realize that it is indeed increasing the rate of injuries for their members, and the money that you all are spending, or anybody is spending, on insurance, is money that's not going towards union jobs. You have developers saying, we're not hiring union labor because of how much we're spending on insurance. Union folks need to understand that. So if you have contacts with your unions, please talk to them about that. Have them call me. If your Nana's a union member, I'll talk to her, just like I said. We got to keep up the pressure. If any of you can, after this, grab my card. I'm happy to speak to any of your civic organizations, any organization you belong to, your Nana, whatever it might be. And you can send a letter about this in 1 minute. 1 minute. Through our platform, scaffoldlaw.org. It's that simple. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Pepe. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, you can just find me. And thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Matthew Pepe. And he is with the Construction Industry Council and the Building Contractors Association. He's the Director of Governmental Relations for the Construction Industry Council. And he is the Executive Director of the Building Contractors Association. And this is just a 30 seconds of my own take on the CIC, my own knowledge of it. This is one of the most powerful heavy industry groups in the state. And tied into our 70th anniversary, your dad, Ross Pepe, was originally got his feet wet in this industry with the Builders Institute with George Frank, and in the 60s and 70s, as I recall.
Yep.
And so our compadres at the CIC are yet another link in this wonderful chain of industry cooperation and industry growth in this county. So Matt was with us and a delegation of the CIC last week in Albany, and he will have a few words to say about this very, very difficult and formidable fight to reform the law. Matt?
Thank you. I was hoping you'd all kind of be a little bit loud when I got up here, because I really want to use that gavel. I've waited my entire life to use a gavel, and this is the opportunity. So if at any point you want to get a little raucous, I'm okay with it. So I remember vividly back in I want to say 97, 98. It was my first event as an official full-time employee at the Construction Industry Council. I went to a luncheon, and Scaffold Law was mentioned. It was a group. There's only two groups that are on the other side of this. It was one of those. But they were saying we can't reform the Scaffold Law. I remember thinking back then, 1998, I was kind of just out of high school, a couple years into college. Listen, I didn't get all straight A's. I wasn't in law school. And even back then, I'm thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And I'm sure a lot of you, when Tom was talking, are probably thinking, he's got to be crazy. What like tort law in this country has absolute liability? I mean, when are you guilty before proven innocent? That's not how it works. It's not how it works in the United States. It's not how it's supposed to work in New York. And apparently that's how it is. I'm as frustrated as Tom is. I should be up here, like Albert said, I should be counterbalancing Tom's frustration, but it's tough. So we had this Scaffold lobby day a couple weeks ago, and we hear time and time again, whether we sit with the legislators or their staff, we hear, well, yeah, that seems to make sense. What's the problem? And the problem, as Tom said, is it's tough to fight the trial attorneys and the unions. I mean, they're out there, and they have the money and the votes, and it's tough. But the message I want to send is, Tom showed at the beginning of his presentation, there was one sheet with a bunch of logos on it. There's 70, 80 logos on there. 5 years ago when we started this, there was 12. And 12 became 20, 20 became 40, to 60 to 80. The first thing I did when I went in a meeting this year at Lobby Day was show that sheet of logos. That has a lot of play. That has a great effect when you sit in these meetings. And my message would be, we want to turn those 80 logos into 2 pages of 80 logos. Every little organization counts, every person counts in this, and it really does help to share your stories with legislators or their staff. They really want to hear your stories about specifics. What are your insurance rates going up on a year-to-year basis? Have you ever had a Scaffold Law? If you've ever had a Scaffold Law case, they want to know about them. We just recently had a contractor in our association. I'll break it down. This is typically what happens when you get a Scaffold Law case. The injured worker will go, they'll find an attorney. It's usually not too hard to find. Actually, in New York City, the union workers wear reflective vests with trial attorney advertisements in the back of them. So if they get hurt, all they got to do is turn around, and they can pick out the cell phones and call the attorney. So what happens is they'll call an attorney, and the attorney will, I'm being general here, but they'll just say, let's just kind of sue everyone. We'll wait, we'll let it all flush out. If we have to change our story, we'll change it, we'll keep going until something works, because really, you're liable. It's absolute liability. Something in the end is going to work out, right? So what happens is they sue the property owner. It goes down to the general contractor, which may go down to the sub. End of the day, the employee, who actually wasn't even a union employee, he was the safety coordinator on the job. built a ramp and tripped on his own ramp, basically because he wasn't looking. They're fully trained, they have daily toolbox talks. This is the guy giving the daily toolbox talks. Sues everybody, and finally falls down to our contractor, settles for $1.5 million. The attorneys immediately get $500,000. A little bit goes back to workers' comp, but that's the crux of it. Is a third of all these lawsuits are going to the trial attorneys. And if you look at the top 25 settlements in New York, over half of them are scaffold law settlements. So it's becoming a real problem. It's very frustrating because we're not even looking to repeal scaffold law. We're not going to legislators and saying, let's just get rid of the law. We don't want to take away a worker's right to sue if he gets hurt. They should be allowed to recover losses if they're really hurt. But let's give a defendant, a contractor, a property owner, let's give the defendant the opportunity to be a defendant. Because right now they're really not getting that. And I think that's another thing that gets a lot of play. If you write a letter to a legislator, you're going to meet with them. We're just asking for the basic tenet of American laws that you're innocent until proven guilty, and it's exactly the opposite when it comes to strict liability. I don't really have anything else to say. Tom covered a lot of it, but we really, every bit of support helps. It really does. Because every year, when we have more and more people at Lobby Day, we hear it all the time. Oh, yeah, I just got a letter about this a couple weeks ago. So the more they can get peppered with your personal letters and business letters throughout the year, it helps remind them when we get up there for Lobby Day, and it really does make a difference. So we hope that, we know the BRI got involved this year, but really on a personal level, and it's what we ask of our members to write letters and share their stories, and I would really encourage all of you here to do the same. Thank you.
Our last speaker, last but not least, is Jason Schiciano, principal and partner at Levitt-Fuirst Associates Limited, our insurance managers. Jason has written extensively for Impact on the impact, no pun intended, of the scaffold law on the industry, and he's brought some additional information, and so I will turn over the microphone to Jason.
I don't need the microphone.
Oh, very good.
Thank you, Albert.
Okay.
All right. So first of all, I want to welcome staff from my office, Robin, Jennifer, Benita, and Dan, and my partner, Ken First, in the back. Many of you work with them. Albert said, you're batting cleanup. And I said, oh boy, that's a big responsibility, because the responsibility is when you're batting cleanup at a BRI meeting is to be brief. So I'm going to try and be real brief. Just real quick, because I think you've probably got a good idea of what the scaffold law is. It's very difficult to keep track of who the players are in the scaffold law, who benefits, who doesn't. So real quick, plus and minus. Green is for good, meaning they benefit. Red is negative for bad. Who benefits from the scaffold law?
Attorneys.
Attorneys. Who else?
Use the block. Can't see that.
Can't see it?
Nope.
You won't need to see it. Don't worry.
Well, he's just repeating.
Just throw them out. Who benefits? Attorneys? Just attorneys. Who?
Workers' comp carrier.
Okay, workers' comp carriers. Who else?
Doctors.
Doctors?
Lawyers and any.
Already heard lawyers. Okay, so we got workers' comp, attorneys, maybe doctors. All right, who doesn't benefit from the law? Who gets hurt by it?
Owners. Business owners.
Owners. Who else?
Subcontract.
Subs.
Taxpayers.
Taxpayers. Who else?
Investors.
Okay.
The individual. The person who's house.
All right, can you guys pass out those documents, please? All right, it's amazing who benefits and doesn't benefit from this law. There's a letter that Albert passed out that I wrote to him a couple of weeks ago that has some facts and figures. Certainly, contractors do not benefit from this law. We did a little review between 2011 and 2012. We had 13 contractor renewals that we looked at, and you can see the figures. 3 contractors in that time period had renewal premiums increased by over 100%. Can you believe that? Over 100%. 6 contractors had premiums increase from 50 to 99%, and then the other 4 contractors had increases anywhere from 10 to 49. So clearly, contractors get killed by this law with respect to their insurance premiums. Now, the other document that's being handed out is, it looks like a spider web or an octopus. I showed it to my partner, Ken. I said, this is what I'm going to hand out tonight. And he shook his head and walked away. He didn't even look at it. That's my point. Okay, this is how complicated the Scaffold Law is and how intertwined this law gets when you look at and you follow the money and who benefits and who doesn't. On the left side, under the green column, are basically the winners of this law. And on the left side are the losers, all right? And you'll find a lot more losers than winners. And the reason that I bring this up is because, we constantly talk about the Scaffold Law affecting the price of insurance for contractors. That's sort of the main point. And that's true, but it goes a lot deeper than that. It was mentioned this evening already that it affects developers. Developers develop less, contractors and developers, as you can see on this sheet, they get sued, right? They get sued by injured workers, and sometimes they get sued by fraudulently injured workers, workers that aren't actually injured. And those lawsuits cause insurance claims. Insurance claims result in higher premiums. Insurance claims result in money going to attorneys. And attorneys, as we can tell, the attorneys that do benefit this law are paying lobbyists to get to the politicians, and the politicians are sometimes even lining their pockets because of this law. And just because Shelley Silver is away, it's not for certain that there still isn't some concern about the politicians and where they stand on this law and how they're benefiting or not. But then there's a whole slew of other entities and people and groups that don't benefit. So besides the developers and the construction and service contractors that service the buildings, the apartment owners, the landlords get hurt by this law because they pay higher liability insurance as well. Because as pointed out, when they own a building, they get named in a lawsuit, and oftentimes the contractor's insurance will not respond to that claim. When landlords have higher prices for their insurance, what do? They pass it on. They increase rent. Condos and co-op associations, they're business owners too. They pay liability insurance. So they get hit by these insurance claims constantly. We see them on a weekly basis. When they have to pay higher insurance because of these claims, what happens?
They pass it on.
They pass it on. Higher association fees, higher maintenance fees, right? Municipalities get killed by this insurance. And one of the biggest issues was the New York school district and the amount of money that they had to pay for insurance. When a municipality or a school district has to pay for insurance, what happens? They pass it on how? Taxes. So you're paying more for school taxes, you're paying more for municipality taxes, but also, what else happens? What's the other negative effect? There's less money for teachers, for building new schools, for building new bridges, for refurbishing the Metro North stations. All of that gets wrapped up into this. And then, at the bottom of this sheet are a number of summary comments on this. All right, ridiculous court awards, forced settlements by insurance companies, everyday contractors saying, why did the insurance company settle that claim? That guy it was a fraudulent claim, it shouldn't have happened, I had no responsibility. The insurance companies, they're playing with their own money. They got to settle it for whatever they think is in their best interest. They got to, they don't want to go to trial. There's no point. You've already heard that tonight. Higher cost of living, fewer jobs, fewer new schools, fewer public work projects, less money to maintain buildings, less development. It goes on and on and on. So this law is not, certainly it affects contractors first and foremost in terms of higher insurance premiums, but as you can see from this terribly complicated web on this page, it affects almost everybody in every sector of life here in New York. Thanks.
Just a modest addition to what Jason said. If you're a landlord in Westchester or Nassau County or Rockland County, let alone New York City, In addition to the New York State being the only state that has the scaffold law, we also have the only rent regulation left in the country. So if costs rise on the insurance end, maybe others can pass that cost along, but landlords who have rent-regulated apartments cannot pass that along because they're capped by whatever the rent increase is yearly by the Rent Guidelines Board. So you see the squeeze in so many different ways, and I think that point was aptly made by Jason. We're coming up on 8:53. We have a little time for questions. Carl? By the way, the rules are, you weren't at the January meeting, the rules are you stand, you articulate, you think the minuet in G, and you speak clearly. Identify yourself and ask the question.
How do you change the law?
Please stand.
All right. So, first and foremost, the fix we're going for is comparative negligence. So we're trying to change the law that essentially goes from what it says now, and we just add a sentence at the end that says, none of the above absolves the plaintiff of culpability for their own actions. That's it. Seems like it should be pretty straightforward. The problem is there's billions of dollars resting on this from the plaintiff's attorney's side. As I think Matt mentioned, of the top 30 lawsuits in New York, over half were scaffold law cases. So we are the most litigious state in the most litigious country in the world, and over half of our largest lawsuits are driven by this law. So it is a massive cost, and all we're looking to do is just add that one quick sentence. The way that needs to get done is it really needs the leadership of the governor. The governor needs to get some stones and do this, in my opinion. And at the time when he said the trial lawyers are the most powerful political force in Albany, I think what he was really referring to was that Sheldon Silver was getting paid $750,000 for a no-show job. So he was really, I think, pointing to that. He doesn't have that excuse anymore. And frankly, the law costs billions, causes injuries. I mean, and we're the only state to have it. It's not rocket science,
Yes, Ken Nelson.
You already announced it. What percentage of our, like as a landlord, what percentage of our premiums can be attributed to the scaffold law? If the scaffold law changed as you indicated, any idea?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, it depends on a lot of different things. But Illinois was the last state to have this, and they repealed it in 1995. By 2000, they had seen a 91% decrease in the loss cost, which is the cost driving their insurance. I'm not saying you'd see a 91% decrease, and and that was really for construction insurance. So the problem is I can give it to you for roofers, I can give it to you for bridge builders, I can give it to you for all these different classifications. For basic property ownership, it's frankly not something I've analyzed. But again, what we saw in Illinois was a massive decrease, 91% over 5 years.
Yeah, the other point to that was pointed out, it took about 5 years for those decreases to happen in Chicago, because if the law is changed, then lawsuits have to be decided underneath the new law. The insurance companies have to see that the law is having the effect that it's supposed to have. Then new insurance companies that are currently not writing insurance in New York will start to come into the market. That they have to file papers with the state in order to sell insurance here. It's a very long drawn-out process, but as new competition comes in from new insurance companies, there are very few, as you know, anyone that's a contractor or building owner knows there are very few insurance companies writing liability insurance in New York. That would likely change if the law is reformed, but it would take time.
Yeah, and that's the biggest issue, is that a lot of insurers are not writing policies. So you have a number of national insurers that write in 49 other states, and they don't write here. So I think actually we would see a quicker decrease in New York than we did in Illinois, because they didn't have the availability problem. The moment it got reformed, I think we would see companies like CNA, companies like Travelers or Hartford or whoever is not writing come back right away and be able to provide relief. The existing carriers couldn't do that because they're still carrying the liabilities from yesterday, right? But the new carriers could kind of come in with a clean slate.
Yeah, just on that same point, I'll make it quick. Just statistics-wise, I mean, for my contractors, they go out for a general liability policy. They're lucky if they can get 2 quotes. I'm sure a lot of people in this room have the same experience. We have equipment rental companies that come to me because they can't even get a quote. If you can't get a quote, you can't work. And so
And that's with no injuries.
Yeah, and that's with the a 1 rating. I mean, or even lower. They don't care because what they've heard is that an insurance company has told me, listen, for every $1 I get in premium, I'm paying out $3 in claims, and you can't survive on that. So they're kind of almost they're doing a contractor or an equipment rental company a favor because they may have a broker that gets them other clients outside of the state, and that's the only way they can get that they can get a policy.
Yes.
Yes, Betsy Clampert. I actually looked up to see what was going on with bills in the Assembly and the Senate, and I see there are at least 3 out there. So how many times has this been introduced, number 1, and number 2, there are co-sponsors, and I see that. Are you building the co-sponsorship of these things? What's going on legislatively here?
Sure. So first, most important is we have a Democrat in the Assembly where it's majority Democrat, and we have a Republican in the Senate where it's majority Republican. There's lots of bills out there. We chose a bill that was sponsored in the Assembly by a man by the name of Joe Morelli, and Joe Morelli is the number 2 in the Assembly. Joe Morelli actually, before he became the number 2, carried a lot of bills for me, for my doctor members, for my banking members, for my other members. When he became Assembly Majority Leader, Majority Leader, not Speaker, Majority Leader, number 2, he dropped all those other bills, but he kept Scaffold Law. And I think that's because, and you talk to him, he'll tell you, the reason I'm doing that is because this is the one that I really feel the conference needs to get behind. But this has been an issue now for 30 years. The problem is now we're just starting to get the data. I mean, nobody, as Ross said 5 years ago, it was the contractors I'm sorry, Ross, Matt. The contractors, it was the contractors. And that was it. And now we got Habitat for Humanity. Now we got the School Boards Association. Now we've got the Farm Bureau and the Conference of Mayors. I mean, we've got so many different groups. I'm hopefully going to get the renewable energy lobby on board. So it's really grown, and we've really also found the data. And I think the most important data that we found is that it causes injuries. I mean, the only defense on this has ever been that it keeps people safe. And it doesn't. So I think now, and that data is new, and so now I think now we're really poised for real change. But we need help from everybody in this room and from kind of all sources in every direction.
We have time for a couple of more questions. Yes.
We have a couple of attorneys here.
Gene.
Yeah, we have a couple of attorneys here. What's the counterpoint? What is their position? Because we're talking.
They're on the defense side, by the way. Those are my peoples.
I'm just saying, defend the law. I want the counterpoint.
Okay, so now you've hired me to defend the law.
You got 2 minutes, Counselor, you got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Very simple. When the law came into existence in 1885, it was to protect workers on scaffolding getting hanging from buildings who were getting killed because the subcontractors were putting them up on defective scaffolding. And the only people who had skin in the game, who could control the work site, were the owner's general contractors. And if you didn't have absolute liability, and you said to the poor immigrant worker who had to work to make a living, that you either go up on that scaffold or you don't work. So if you don't have absolute liability, then the poor worker who has no skills or minimal skills stalls. That's how you defend the law. The reality is that over the course of years, the judiciary has expanded the scope of the law to the point that, for those of us who are Jewish, a chuppah is a structure under the labor law of the state of New York. I think that everything that the panel said is very true. I think that you are fighting a tremendous uphill battle on lobbying for change, and I believe that eventually we will get change. The trial lawyers throw more money at this than you can fathom. The insurance industry, the Small Contractors Association, and the building owners contribute minimal amounts to amend the law. And you're never going to do away with the scaffold law. And even as a defendant, I'm going to tell you, I don't want to do away with the scaffold law. But I just want comparative negligence. I want to be able to apply to tell a jury of the culpability, and I can't do anything in 2 minutes. I get 55
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pull the hook on you. I'm sorry.
Also, the fallacy is that the insurance industry is not united in lobbying against this law because the workers' comp carriers in New York don't want to do away with the law because the workers' comp carriers in New York cut off nobody. So you break your toe, and 3 years later you get a herniated disc and you get operated on, and the comp carrier pays it, and then the comp carrier gets it back because it's absolute liability, so they're going to get 2/3 of their money back. Last but not least, to building owners in New York, everything I do, and I represent the biggest contractors, I represent the Environmental Contractors Association, I represent the site safety coordinators.
I get the point. I get the point.
Risk transfer. Okay, you don't want to be at the bottom of the sliding pond. You want to be at the top of the sliding pond. And to do that, you need contracts that protect you. So if you're a small subcontractor in upstate New York, and I have offices in Syracuse, you can't work because you can't afford your insurance.
All right, Counselor, so I'm going to have to stop you there. So in other words, your 2-minute elevator speech is about 8 minutes. All right, on that very positive note, Gene, I want to thank you for asking that question. Remind me not to call on you next time. It is one humdinger of an issue, and we will keep you posted. We will continue to write about it, to publicize it. We'll have the link with your site, Tom. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to ask that fine attorney in the back of the room or Tom Stebbins. Safe home, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you at the next meeting.